Am I the a-hole stories? Am I the a-hole for never telling my parents I had a son that was given up for adoption? My parents were very cold, strict, and controlling people almost my entire life. Very religious and always cared about how the rest of their church viewed them, so they were even harder on me to always be perfect. I was out of the house at 18. I didn't have any money since my parents never let me work, so I lived with friends. My girlfriend and I were only 19 when she got pregnant. Neither of us with a place of our own, no money. We weren't at all prepared to be parents. Despite trying to break away from our parents' strict religious views, we still felt guilt about considering termination. I'm completely pro-choice by the way, but personally, we couldn't bring ourselves to do it, and looked into adoption instead. We went through the process, and our son was adopted by a nice enough couple. It hurt for a long time, but we eventually moved on with our lives. The thing is, I never told my parents anything. I feared what they would do if they found out. Yes, at that age I still feared them. Mostly afraid they would try to adopt him instead, and raise him in the same dysfunctional household, which I couldn't allow knowing how they'd be. We were no contact at all when this was happening, and didn't speak until after 15 years. My dad had a heart attack and was in the hospital. I reached out and helped while he was in recovery. They both wanted to mend our relationship, since this was sort of a wake-up call, and while it's not perfect and they're in some ways still stuck in a certain mindset, I know they have tried to be more open and loving. Now when my bio son was adopted, we agreed he was free to contact us once he was older, and that's exactly what he did when he was 19. Ben has been in my life for almost 2 years, and it's been such a blessing getting to know the wonderful man he grew up to be. Ben has expressed interest in meeting my parents, as he's already met my ex's parents. He knows the whole story about them, and that they don't know about him at all. He's fine if I don't want them to know, but I decided it was time anyways and decided to speak with them. Boy, was it a major disaster. My mom was so upset she was almost in tears, and my dad wouldn't even look at me. They acted like I was a monster for never telling them they had a grandchild out in the world, and also angry at the fact that I gave him away, when they would have given him a home. They were far too upset, so I left the house. Despite having confirmation that they would have tried to adopt him, and it was the right choice not to let that happen, I have gotten a lot of talks from my mom's family, agreeing adoption was the best choice, but that my parents still had the right to know of their own grandchild's existence. For that, they believe I was in fact wrong for keeping them from knowing this. I understand lies, especially of this magnitude, would blow up eventually anyways, but I am questioning whether my choice was so bad. I'm the a-hole for it. Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. You went no contact for years for a reason. They probably wouldn't have raised that boy any better than they raised you. Letting them know they had a grandchild would have probably caused a crap show. You kept it out and let you and your son have semi-normal and healthy lives. Not the a-hole exactly this. You did the right thing for your son. It was the best option for him. You gave him a life out of that toxic environment. You have confirmation now that they would have tried to adopt him themselves. That should be enough to reassure yourself that you did right for your child. Not the a-hole. I grew up in a fundamentalist cult. I never would have wanted my own child to be raised in that environment. When you are extremely sheltered, manipulated, controlled, and terrified by your parents, it is very difficult to make adult decisions. You were extremely young at the time. You did what you thought was best for your son, and gave him a good life. You arguably made the best decision you possibly could have made for him. Hindsight is 20/20, and maybe you should have told your parents. But your reasons for not telling them are valid. I remember very well how easily I caved to my parents' whims, despite trying to stand up for myself. What if they had hounded you day, after day, after day? Would you have been able to maintain your resolve, and give Ben up for adoption? They would have placed an insane amount of guilt on you. I know that if it were me, I would never want a child raised in that environment, but the pressure from my own parents would have been insane. Your parents are mad now, but they would have been mad for the last 19 years if you told them. With the knowledge that you have now, you might question if you should have told your parents about your decision. I don't think there is an easy answer for that, but you did it from a sense of self-preservation, not to hurt them or to be spiteful. I'm not a cruel person. Despite the differences I have with my parents, I don't deliberately hurt them. But a part of me feels like you should simply look your parents right in the eyes, and say that you decided to keep the knowledge of Ben from them, because of how they treated you growing up. And you didn't want your own son raised with the same sense of despair. But I also know how parents like ours play the victim, and it would only make things more volatile. When my parents tell me they are disappointed with me now, in my own head I just shrug my shoulders like, you were never proud of me growing up, so how is this different? The only difference is that, now I live my life to take care of myself first. I wish I had more words of comfort or encouragement. I think you just need to find peace in the fact that you made the best possible decision for Ben. They can either choose to be in a relationship with you and your son, or they can continue to play the victim, and not be part of your lives. I feel you, and I grew up with the exact same parents. At that age, I know I would have done anything they asked me no matter how hard I tried to be defiant. It's the reason why I knew having no contact at all was the best way to finally break away from their control. Thank you for this. It's very reassuring during a time like this, when it feels like the rest of the world is against you, to be reminded that this was the best choice. I am beyond proud of the man he's become. I don't think that would have been possible had he gone with them. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for not telling my family I have a biological child? Sorry in advance on mobile. So, I will begin by saying that I, 28 male, have been married to my wife, 29 female, for 5 years, together for 12. We have a great relationship and I have never been unfaithful. Where this conflict begins, is 10 years ago when I met my best friend Jane, 28 female, and her husband Tim, 29 male. At the time Tim identified as female, but has since transitioned to male. My wife and I are very supportive of him. Jane is one of my best friends and gets along great with my wife. 4 years ago, Tim and Jane wanted to start a family, and looked into getting a donor as Jane wanted a biological child. They wanted to actually know the donor in case the child had medical issues or needed a kidney. They asked me if I would consider it. I have good genes, and I was someone close to the family. After discussing it with my wife and more discussions between the four of us, we agreed. My wife was actually a surrogate for her sister a year before this, and we are very open to helping people have children. We signed a contract with Jane and Tim, making sure all legalities were taken care of. Their son Gabe was born 3 years ago now. The role I play in his life is the fun uncle who spoils him, and occasionally watches him. Tim is his father in every important way. We agreed that we would tell Gabe when he was older, that while Tim is his father, I am his biological donor. I didn't tell my family, because I didn't want them interfering in Gabe's life. My mother can be a bit much. Tim and Jane should be able to raise their son without interference. We were all happy with this arrangement. Now that he is older, Gabe has started to look more and more like me when I was his age. For Thanksgiving Tim, Jane, and Gabe came over after quarantining themselves for 2 weeks. My mother did a drive-by, and saw Gabe sitting on my shoulders. Something must have clicked and she put 2 and 2 together. She called me later, crying asking if I was Gabe's father. I told her I am his donor, and that Tim is his father. She blew up at me. How I am depriving her of one of her grandchildren. My sister has 3 children. My sister later called and was pissed, but when I explained the situation, she understood. She just said we shouldn't keep secrets like this. I told her it was none of their business, and we have no say in how Tim and Jane raise Gabe. She called me an idiot. My mother will not talk to me. My dad has said they had a right to know, and want to be part of Gabe's life. So, am I the a-hole for not telling my family I have a biological child? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole. Gabe is not her grandchild, and she isn't entitled to him. Well, actually the child is her grandchild biologically, but she will have to accept that her son was acting as the donor and legally isn't the father. Gabe is not her grandchild, legally or socially. That doesn't trump the weak biological connection. Not sure what your comment is supposed to prove. Not the a-hole. Absolutely not. They're turning a selfless gift into a selfish act. It is not and will never be about them. You need to do everything in your power to protect Gabe, and Tim and Jane from your family. They should also know that they know this well, so Tim and Jane can be on the lookout for future run-ins. Not the a-hole, and your intuition about your nosy parents was exactly right. They have no right to be in Gabe's life. You and your wife sound like wonderful people, and I hope you all continue to be important parts of Gabe's development. Out. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to be in a child's life that I gave birth to? Background: my best friend couldn't have children, the risk of her death was too high and she already was having fertility problems. So long story short, I agreed to be her family surrogate, mostly due to the fact that she was my best friend. I cannot stand her husband though, the only reason I did this was for her. So, I became pregnant with their child and everything went smoothly. There was a contract in place, that I wouldn't be financially responsible for the kid and so on. It was a pretty standard contract. Well, that was 6 years ago and my best friend died. Due to the 2020 plague, I wasn't able to attend her funeral. Her husband has been calling me recently that I should step up as the kid's mother, because I did give birth to her. He keeps calling, that I need to be in his daughter's life. After declining multiple times, I finally told him that kid isn't mine, even though I gave birth to her. That I have no obligation to do jack stuff, and that I'm not going to replace my best friend as her mother. He called me an a-hole and going to get his lawyer involved. So, am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. You're not the a-hole. Let him get his lawyer. He doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. I am really sorry you're going through this. Keep records of your conversations in case you need to get a no-contact order. This sounds like he was not involved in parenting, and continuing to avoid it after his wife's death. Not the a-hole, although I'm nervous for the child. Yeah, looks like he's trying to get a free babysitter in OP. I agree, he's after a free babysitter, and faux stepmommy. Unless you want to go after full custody, cut him off, and out of your life. I'm sorry you and the kid lost someone who was important to you. Most definitely not the a-hole. This guy sounds like he's wanting someone to do all the work for him, and he's obviously not the best guy based on your judgment of him. He can get all the lawyers involved that he wants, a contract is binding. He needs to be the one to step up. Not the a-hole. Right, I get the feeling he didn't want a kid, his wife did, and he agreed to it. He doesn't want her to take responsibility, he wants to push the child off to someone else so he won't have to care and raise for her. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for making potentially embarrassing family genealogy discoveries visible on Ancestry.com? I've been the extended family's amateur genealogist for more than 20 years. I've built an enormous family tree on Ancestry.com. Names and details on all living people are hidden, unless I give special permission to someone. Info on deceased people is visible. Like a lot of American families, there's a persistent myth that we have some Native American heritage. My late paternal grandmother told us that she was descended from a French soldier who married a Native American woman. Well, Grandma, who was a very sweet lady, made this up. She was orphaned at age 2, and didn't even remember her biological parents. Maybe she just wanted an origin story? I figured out who her biological parents were earlier this year, by triangulating my DNA matches and searching other people's public family trees. My great-grandparents were Eastern European immigrants. From newfound relations, I was able to learn a bit of family history. No Native Americans are in it. I'd actually forgotten about the Native American stories. My dad is no longer alive, but I shared this info with his brother, my uncle. He thanked me but asked, "Are you 100% sure there's no Indians?" His word, not mine, in our tree? "Yep, 100% sure," I told him. He responded, "Well, Ronnie, fake name, isn't going to like hearing that. Ronnie is my cousin, I haven't seen him since we were kids," and he apparently took the Native American thing to heart. He went out and got a bunch of tattoos with symbols from some local tribe. I checked out his Facebook, and sure enough, he and his kids even go to local powwows, and are tribal dancers. I had no idea. To look at Ronnie, I guess you could believe he had somewhat exotic ethnicity if he claimed it. Dark hair and eyes, warm skin tone, high cheekbones, large nose. On the other hand, he looks pretty damn Slavic too. I had, and have no intention of telling anybody in Ronnie's world, that this is untrue. But he did not take the news well. His dad shared my number and I got a text from Ronnie telling me to take down any info about our family origin immediately. I responded no, and reassured him that his name wasn't displayed, and his secret was safe with me. I'm not trying to out anybody as anything. I don't share findings on Facebook, and you'd really have to dig through the Ancestry.com tree and know what to look for, to find these nuggets on your own. He texted back, "You're a freaking witch." I blocked him. In hindsight, I wish I'd have responded, "And you're a white dude?" Now my uncle has asked me to remove the info as well, for his grandkids' sake. I repeated what I told Ronnie. At least my uncle didn't curse at me, though he is disappointed. I'm sorry Ronnie didn't have the foresight to do his own research before going native, but I don't think I'm an a-hole for accurately representing our family history where someone else could see it. Or am I? Now for the top comments. Not the a-hole, Ronnie should have checked and double-checked before he based his lifestyle on a story. Good for you for standing up for yourself. In all fairness, I don't think these resources were readily available a couple of decades ago when Ronnie was a youth. I don't really think it's fair to tell the person to do their research retroactively when that probably wasn't possible. Not the a-hole. It was a huge thing, back in the day, for grandparents to tell family we were part Native American. I have no idea why. My mom's side was Cherokee. We aren't, and are as white as could be. We're Irish, English, and German with a little Russian thrown in. Based on my, admittedly limited, knowledge in this area, at the turn of the 19th century, when indigenous groups had been suppressed, a lot of their population had died, from disease/war/trail of tears, all the other terrible things, and the myth of the noble savage became popular. Pointing to native heritage became a way of claiming a connection to the land. Having some slight native heritage creates a much more palatable story than being the white invaders that took the land, especially when cultural attitudes towards indigenous people softened. Regardless, OP is not the a-hole. Even if the cousin was 1/16th Cherokee, claiming native heritage after being raised as a white person is kind of gross, especially if her cousin had no authentic connection to the culture before he got all his tribal tattoos. The fact that he is so mad over the 1/16th of heritage he thought he had, shows how thin the veneer was in the first place. Not the a-hole. Like a lot of American families, there's a persistent myth that we have some Native American heritage. I've got some Indian in me, was the earlier generations, but I've got a black friend. For a lot of people, it was that they literally had black ancestors, but were mostly white passing, so they used the Native American cover to explain any darker colorings, or not quite white-looking babies. And that's it for this video guys. If you have thoughts to share, leave a comment below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you like this content. I'll catch you in the next one. Good day everyone.